"From now on, Mom, the bank will transfer your pension directly to my account. You don't need anything, just a corner to die in." Those words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I stood there in my own kitchen, the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for my son Samuel, where I had helped him with homework at that very table, where I had celebrated his graduation just 3 years ago. Now, at 68, I was being told I needed nothing more than a corner to die in. My name is Evelyn Washington, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. For most of my life, I believed that love and sacrifice would always be rewarded with love in return. I was wrong. I swallowed hard, the familiar taste of tears mixing with the bitterness that had been growing in my chest for months. "Samuel," I whispered, my voice barely audible. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his phone, texting someone, probably his wife Melissa. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said without lifting his eyes. Melissa ran the numbers. "Your pension is more than enough to cover your basic needs, and we can manage it better than you can. You're getting older, Mom. It's time to be practical." Practical. That word echoed in my mind as I watched my only child, the boy I had raised alone after his father died when Samuel was just 8 years old. The boy I had worked 3 jobs to put through college. The boy who used to call me his hero. "This is my house, Samuel," I said quietly, placing my weathered hand on the kitchen counter. "I bought this house. I paid for it with my own money." He finally looked up from his phone, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance that I was making this difficult. "And now you can't afford to maintain it properly," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd heard him use with his coworkers on phone calls. "Look around, Mom. The roof needs work. The plumbing is old. Melissa and I can take care of everything. We're doing you a favor. Melissa. Always Melissa." My daughter-in-law, who had never worked a day in her life, who came from money and had never understood what it meant to struggle, who had slowly, methodically turned my son against me from the moment they got married 2 years ago. I thought about the first time I met Melissa. Samuel had been so nervous, so eager for my approval. She had been polite then, even sweet, asking about my work at the hospital where I'd been a custodian for 37 years. But that sweetness had curdled quickly once she realized where Samuel came from, once she understood that his mother was just a cleaning lady from the wrong side of Briar Hollow. "I've managed this house just fine for 23 years, I said, my voice stronger now. "Since before you even graduated high school." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Things were different then. You were younger. And frankly, Mom, your judgment hasn't been great lately. Melissa found those overdue bills in your purse last week." My heart sank. Those bills weren't overdue because I couldn't afford them. They were overdue because I had been helping Mrs. Chen next door with her medical expenses after her husband's stroke. But I hadn't told Samuel that because I knew he wouldn't understand. The Samuel I raised would have been proud of me for helping a neighbor. This Samuel would only see it as poor financial management. "Those bills are paid now," I said. "That's not the point. The point is that you're not thinking clearly about money anymore. Melissa has a business degree. She knows how to handle finances." I wanted to laugh, but it would have come out bitter and broken. Melissa's idea of handling finances was spending Samuel's engineering salary on designer handbags and spa treatments while pressuring him to distance himself from his embarrassing mother. "And where exactly is my corner?" I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Samuel had the decency to look uncomfortable. "The small bedroom upstairs. We'll clean it out, make it nice for you. You'll have everything you need." Everything I need. The small bedroom upstairs had been Samuel's room when he was young. Then it had become my sewing room, where I altered clothes to make extra money during the lean years. Now it would be my prison. What about my things, my furniture, my kitchen? We'll keep what makes sense and donate the rest. Melissa has some ideas about redecorating. This place could really be something special with the right touches. There it was. The truth, finally. This wasn't about taking care of me or managing my finances. This was about Melissa wanting my house. My beautiful little house with its big windows and the garden I'd spent decades nurturing. The house I'd bought with my own sweat and sacrifice. "I see," I said quietly. Samuel must have heard something in my voice because he finally looked at me. Really looked at me. for the first time since he'd walked into my kitchen with his devastating news. "Mom, I know this is hard, but we're family. We take care of each other. This way, we can all be together, and you don't have to worry about anything anymore." Family. The word that used to mean everything to me now felt like a lie, because family doesn't humiliate each other. Family doesn't take away someone's independence and dignity and call it love. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Samuel seemed relieved that I wasn't fighting anymore. "Great. I'll call the bank tomorrow and set up the transfer. And Melissa wants to start going through your things this weekend, so we can get you moved upstairs as soon as possible." He kissed my forehead like he used to do when he was little, and for just a moment, I could almost pretend he was still my baby boy who would never hurt me. Then he was gone, the front door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through my suddenly empty house. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by 40 years of memories, and let the tears fall. I cried for the little boy who used to help me fold laundry and tell me about his dreams. I cried for the young man who had hugged me so tight at his college graduation and whispered, "I did this for you, Mama." I cried for the future I had imagined, where I would be a beloved grandmother, where my sacrifices would mean something, where love would be enough. But even as I cried, something else was growing inside me. Not anger exactly, though there was some of that. Not hatred, because despite everything, Samuel was still my son. It was something quieter, but more powerful. It was the same feeling I'd had when Samuel's father died and left me alone with an 8-year-old boy and a mountain of bills. The same feeling I'd had when my supervisor at the hospital tried to fire me for taking too many sick days when Samuel had pneumonia. The same feeling I'd had every time life tried to break me. Determination. I walked to my refrigerator and opened it, looking at the neat shelves lined with Samuel's favorite foods that I still kept, even though he rarely visited anymore. Tomorrow, I would start making changes. Small ones at first. Changes that might seem insignificant to someone who wasn't paying attention. But I had learned something important in my 68 years on this earth. Sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply refusing to disappear, refusing to become invisible, refusing to accept that you don't matter. I closed the refrigerator and walked to my bedroom, where I sat on the bed I'd shared with Samuel's father all those years ago. I pulled out a small notebook from my nightstand drawer and began to write. "Day 1, I wrote. "Samuel wants to take my pension and my house. He thinks I need nothing but a corner to die in. He's about to learn that Evelyn Washington is far from ready to die. And corners, well, corners can be very interesting places when you know how to use them." I closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Not the ending Samuel and Melissa expected, but a beginning they never saw coming. Because they had forgotten something important about me. I hadn't survived 68 years by giving up. I hadn't raised a successful son by accepting defeat. And I certainly hadn't worked my way from nothing to owning my own home by letting people walk all over me. They wanted me to disappear into a corner? Fine. But they were about to discover that corners are where the most interesting shadows live. And I had been moving in shadows, unseen and underestimated, my entire life. The game was just beginning. 3 days later, Samuel returned with Melissa and a stack of official-looking papers. I was sitting in my living room, calmly sipping tea from my favorite china cup, the one Samuel had given me for Mother's Day 5 years ago, back when he still remembered such things. "Mom, we need you to sign these," Samuel said, spreading the documents across my coffee table without asking permission. "It's just paperwork to make the transition smoother." I set down my teacup and looked at the papers. Power of attorney, bank account transfer forms, something about property management, all very official, all very legal, all designed to strip away every bit of control I had over my own life. "I see," I said quietly, picking up the first document. "And what happens if I don't sign these?" Melissa spoke for the first time since entering my house. "Evelyn, we've discussed this. Samuel is trying to help you. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I noticed she didn't call me Mom anymore. She used to, in the beginning. Now I was just Evelyn, like I was some distant acquaintance instead of her husband's mother. "I wasn't asking you, Melissa," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I was asking my son. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. Mom, please. We're all on the same side here. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone, I repeated. Including me? Especially you, Melissa interjected again. You're getting older, Evelyn. These kinds of financial decisions can be overwhelming. Samuel has your best interests at heart. I looked at my daughter-in-law, really looked at her. Melissa was a beautiful woman, blonde, perfectly styled, wearing clothes that cost more than I used to make in a month. But there was something cold in her green eyes, something calculating that had nothing to do with my best interests. Tell me something, Melissa, I said, setting the papers down. What do you know about my financial situation? She blinked, caught off guard. Well, Samuel told me about your pension, and we looked at your monthly expenses. Did you know that I own this house free and clear? No mortgage, no liens, nothing. Did you know that I have a savings account with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life? Did you know that I've been managing my finances successfully for 40 years? Melissa's cheeks flushed slightly. That's not the point. The point is that you're not getting any younger, and accidents happen. What if you fall? What if you get confused about payments? Samuel is just trying to protect you. From what? I asked. From living in my own home? From making my own decisions? From having any dignity in my old age? Mom, that's not fair, Samuel said, but his voice lacked conviction. We just want to take care of you. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting slightly, but my back straight and proud. Samuel, when you were 8 and your father died, did I give up? Did I let other people make decisions for me? No, but when you wanted to go to college and we didn't have the money, did I throw up my hands and say it was too overwhelming? Or did I work 3 jobs and take out loans and make it happen? Samuel's jaw tightened. Mom, this is different. How? How is it different? Because I'm older? Because you think I'm not capable anymore? I picked up the power of attorney document. This paper would give you the right to sell my house without my permission. It would let you control every penny I have. It would make me a child in my own life. Is that how you want to repay everything I've done for you? You're being dramatic, Melissa said, her voice sharp now. Samuel is your son. He loves you. He's not going to hurt you. I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I had raised. Do you love me, Samuel? Of course I do. That's a ridiculous question. Then why does this feel like punishment? Why does it feel like you're ashamed of me? The room fell silent. Samuel stared at his hands, and I could see the truth in his avoidance. He was ashamed. Ashamed of his mother who had worked as a custodian. Ashamed of the small house in the working-class neighborhood. Ashamed of the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him the life he now lived. Nobody's ashamed of anybody, Melissa said quickly. This is about practicality, about making smart decisions for the future. Whose future? I asked. Mine or yours? What is that supposed to mean? Melissa's voice was defensive now. It means I've seen how you look at my house, Melissa. How you walk through my rooms like you're already redecorating them in your mind. It means I've heard you telling Samuel that this neighborhood has potential and that property values are rising. It means I'm not as foolish as you think I am. Samuel finally looked up. Mom, we would never what? Never take advantage of an old woman? Never manipulate your own mother? Never lie to yourselves about what you're really doing here? I walked to the window and looked out at my garden, where my tomatoes were just starting to ripen and my roses were in full bloom. I had planted those roses the year Samuel graduated from high school. I had tended this garden through drought and flood, through seasons of plenty and seasons of want. I'm not signing these papers, I said without turning around. Mom, be reasonable, Samuel started. I am being reasonable. I'm being more reasonable than you deserve. I turned back to face them. You want to help me? Fine. Help me by visiting more than once a month. Help me by calling just to see how I'm doing. Not because you need something. Help me by treating me like a person instead of a problem to be managed. Melissa stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Samuel, your mother is clearly not thinking rationally. Maybe we should talk to someone about other options. Other options. The threat was subtle but clear. If I didn't cooperate, they would find other ways to get what they wanted. Legal ways, medical ways, ways that would paint me as an incompetent old woman who couldn't take care of herself. "Are you threatening me, Melissa?" I asked quietly. "I'm not threatening anyone," she said, but her eyes said otherwise. "I'm just pointing out that there are procedures for situations like this, when elderly people can't make sound decisions anymore." The room felt electric with tension. Samuel was looking back and forth between his wife and his mother like he was watching a tennis match, apparently unable to choose a side. "Samuel," I said, my voice very soft, "do you remember when you were 12 and you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with your baseball? Do you remember what I told you?" He nodded reluctantly. "You said that how we handle our mistakes shows who we really are. And what did you do?" I apologized to Mrs. Henderson and paid for the window with my allowance money, even though it took you 6 months to save up enough money, even though your friends thought you were stupid for admitting it was your fault." I walked over to him and placed my hand on his cheek, the way I used to when he was little. That boy, that honest, brave boy, he's still in there somewhere, isn't he? For just a moment, Samuel's facade cracked. I saw pain in his eyes, and guilt, and something that might have been regret. But then Melissa cleared her throat, and the moment was gone. "We should go," she said firmly. "Evelyn clearly needs time to think about this, but we can't wait forever, Samuel. There are deadlines for some of these financial arrangements." Samuel gathered up the papers, not looking at me. "We'll come back next week, Mom. Maybe you'll feel differently then." "I won't," I said simply. "But you're welcome to come back anyway. You're always welcome in my home, Samuel, both of you. That's what family means." And they left without another word, and I watched from my window as they got into Samuel's expensive car and drove away. I could see them arguing, Melissa's hands gesturing angrily while Samuel gripped the steering wheel. I returned to my tea, which had grown cold while we talked. As I waited for the kettle to boil again, I thought about Melissa's threat, other options, legal procedures, the implication that I was incompetent, that I couldn't make sound decisions. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I had been making sound decisions since before Melissa was born. I had navigated workplace discrimination, single motherhood, financial hardship, and a dozen other challenges that would have broken someone weaker. But they were right about one thing. There were procedures for situations like this, legal protections for elderly people, resources for those who needed help understanding their rights. I made a mental note to visit the senior center tomorrow, not because I needed help making decisions, but because I needed to understand exactly what weapons they might try to use against me. I also made another mental note, one that brought a small smile to my face for the first time in days. It was time to have a conversation with my neighbors, time to let them know what was happening, time to make sure that if Samuel and Melissa tried to paint me as incompetent or confused, there would be plenty of people ready to testify otherwise. The kettle whistled, interrupting my thoughts. As I poured the hot water over fresh tea leaves, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time since Samuel had walked into my kitchen 3 days ago, I felt like myself again. They wanted a fight? They were about to get one. But it wouldn't be the kind of fight they expected. It would be quieter, smarter, and far more devastating than anything they could imagine. Because I had something they didn't have. Nothing left to lose. The Briar Hollow Senior Center was buzzing with activity when I walked in the next morning. I had been coming here occasionally for their health screenings and social events. But today, I was here for something much more serious. "Evelyn!" called out Dorothy Martinez, a retired teacher who ran the legal aid clinic. "What brings you in today, honey?" I had known Dorothy for 15 years. She had helped me navigate the paperwork when I was applying for Social Security, and she had always been someone I could trust. If anyone would understand my situation, it would be her. "I need some advice, Dorothy. Legal advice." Her expression grew serious immediately. Dorothy had been helping seniors with legal issues for over a decade, and she could recognize trouble when she saw it. "Let's go to my office," she said, leading me to a small room lined with law books and filing cabinets. I told her everything. About Samuel's demands, about the papers they wanted me to sign, about Melissa's threats of other options. Dorothy listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Evelyn," she said when I finished, "what they're asking you to do is essentially hand over your entire life to them. This power of attorney document is very broad. It would give Samuel control over your medical decisions, your finances, your property, everything. But they can't force me to sign it, right? No, they can't force you. But, Dorothy hesitated, there are other legal avenues they could pursue if they wanted to be vindictive about it. They could try to have you declared incompetent. They could petition for guardianship. It's not easy to do, and they'd need medical evidence, but it's possible. My heart sank a little. So what are my options? Dorothy smiled, and I could see why her students had loved her. Oh, honey, you have more options than you think. First, you're clearly competent. You're articulate. You understand the documents. You're making rational decisions about your own welfare. Any court would see that. Second, there are laws specifically designed to protect seniors from financial exploitation, even from family members. She pulled out a pamphlet and handed it to me. Elder abuse laws. If Samuel and Melissa are trying to coerce you into signing over your assets, that could constitute financial abuse. There are penalties for that, including criminal charges. I don't want to send my son to jail, I said quickly. I understand, but you need to know your rights. You also need to document everything. Every conversation, every threat, every attempt to pressure you. Keep a detailed record. I thought about the notebook in my bedside drawer. I had been writing in it every night since this started. There's something else, Dorothy continued. I'd recommend getting a comprehensive medical evaluation. Not because I think you need it, but because it would be good to have official documentation of your mental competency. If they try to challenge you later, you'll have recent medical records showing that you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. We talked for another hour about my options, about resources available to me, about the steps I could take to protect myself. By the time I left the senior center, I felt armed with knowledge and confidence. My next stop was Dr. Patricia Williams' office. Dr. Williams had been my physician for 12 years, ever since I moved to this neighborhood. She was a black woman about my daughter's age, if I had had a daughter, and she had always treated me with respect and genuine care. Mrs. Washington, what can I do for you today? She asked as I settled into the chair across from her desk. I need a favor, Patricia. I need you to document that I'm mentally competent and capable of making my own decisions. Her eyebrows went up. Is someone suggesting otherwise? I explained the situation, and I watched her expression grow increasingly troubled. Evelyn, this is terrible. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. She pulled out her prescription pad. I'm going to refer you to Dr. Martinez. He's a neuropsychologist who specializes in cognitive assessments for seniors. But I can tell you right now, based on our conversation today and every interaction we've had over the years, you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Will you put that in writing? Absolutely. I'll write a letter for your files documenting your mental status as of today's date. And Evelyn, if anyone calls this office asking about your competency, they'll need your written permission to get any information. Don't give that permission unless you want to. I left Dr. Williams' office feeling even more empowered, but my most important stop was still ahead of me. Mrs. Chen was tending her vegetable garden when I walked up her driveway. At 72, she was 4 years older than me, but twice as energetic. Her husband's stroke had slowed them down, but they were still the heart of our neighborhood. Evelyn, she called out, wiping dirt from her hands. How are you, dear? I haven't seen you in a few days. I'm all right, Mrs. Chen. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something important. We sat on her front porch, overlooking the street where I had lived for 23 years. Mrs. Chen listened as I told her about Samuel and Melissa's plans. That's terrible, she exclaimed when I finished. Your Samuel always seemed like such a nice boy. He was. I don't know what happened to him. I sighed. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you a favor. If anyone comes around asking questions about me, about my mental state, about whether I can take care of myself, I need you to tell them the truth about who I am and how I live. Of course, dear. But you should talk to the others, too. Mrs. Patterson, the Johnsons, the Garcias. Everyone knows you're as sharp as a tack. I plan to. But there's something else. They might try to say I'm not managing my finances well. They might point to those bills you saw me paying last month. Mrs. Chen's face flushed. The bills for Henry's physical therapy? Evelyn, you paid those out of your own pocket when our insurance denied the claims. You probably saved my husband's recovery. How dare they use that against you? I'm not sure they know the full story, but if anyone asks, If anyone asks, they'll hear exactly what kind of woman you are. A woman who helps her neighbors without being asked. A woman who brought us dinner every night for 3 weeks after Henry's stroke. A woman who organized the whole neighborhood to help when the Garcia's house flooded last spring. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me for telling the truth. Mrs. Chen reached over and squeezed my hand. But Evelyn, you should know, if they try to force you out of your house, if they try to hurt you in any way, this whole neighborhood will stand with you. We've seen what kind of person you are for 23 years. That has to count for something. I spent the rest of the afternoon visiting neighbors, having similar conversations. Mrs. Patterson, who I had helped through her husband's funeral 5 years ago. The Johnsons, whose teenage son I had tutored in math when he was struggling in school. The Garcia family, who still considered me their guardian angel after I had organized disaster relief when their basement flooded. By evening, I realized something amazing. I wasn't alone. I had built a community, a family of choice, made up of people who knew my character and respected my contributions. Samuel and Melissa might have money and legal threats, but I had something more powerful. I had witnesses to my life. That night, I called my old supervisor from the hospital, Martha Stevens. Martha had retired the same year I did, but we had stayed in touch. Evelyn, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing? After I explained the situation, Martha was quiet for a long moment. Evelyn, this is heartbreaking, but I want you to know something. In 37 years of working with you, I never once questioned your judgment, your integrity, or your competence. You were one of the most reliable, thoughtful employees I ever supervised. If you need character references, if you need someone to testify about your mental capacity and judgment, I'm your woman. Thank you, Martha. That means everything to me. There's something else. Do you remember Jennifer Walsh? She was a social worker at the hospital, worked with discharge planning. Of course, she helped families navigate the system. She's in private practice now, specializes in elder law and family conflicts. I think you should talk to her. She's seen situations like this before, and she knows how to protect people. I wrote down Jennifer's contact information, adding it to the growing list of allies I was assembling. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on how much had changed in just one day. This morning, I had felt isolated and vulnerable. Tonight, I felt like a general preparing for battle, surrounded by loyal troops. Samuel and Melissa thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman. They thought I would simply crumble under pressure, sign their papers, and disappear into that upstairs bedroom like a ghost of my former self. They had no idea what they had awakened. For 68 years, I had been building relationships, earning respect, proving my worth to everyone except, apparently, my own son. Now, all of those investments were about to pay dividends. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, Day 4. Today I remembered who I am. Not just Samuel's mother, not just an old woman they want to control. I am Evelyn Washington, neighbor, friend, community member, survivor. I have an army now, and it's made up of everyone whose life I've touched with kindness over the years. Samuel and Melissa want to make this a war. Bring it on. But they're fighting on my territory now, and I know every inch of this battlefield. Tomorrow, I would call Jennifer Walsh. Tomorrow, I would start building my legal defenses. But tonight, for the first time since this nightmare began, I went to sleep feeling hopeful, because I had remembered something important. Love, freely given, always comes back to you. Maybe not from the people you expect, maybe not in the way you expect, but it always comes back. And I had been giving love to this community for 23 years. It was time to collect. The confrontation came exactly 1 week later, but not in the way I expected. I was in my garden, harvesting tomatoes for what I planned to be a large batch of sauce, enough to share with my neighbors, as I did every summer, when I heard the vehicles pull up. Not just Samuel's car this time, but 2 others. Through my garden gate, I could see Samuel and Melissa getting out of the first car, along with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. From the second car emerged a woman with a clipboard and a badge, and another man with a medical bag. My heart started pounding, but I kept my hands steady as I placed my tomatoes in the basket. I had been expecting something like this ever since Melissa's threats about other options. But I was ready. "Mom," Samuel called out as they approached my front door. "We need to talk to you." I took my time walking from the garden to the front porch, basket in hand. My neighbors were already taking notice. Mrs. Chen had come out to get her mail and was lingering by her mailbox. Mr. Johnson was suddenly very interested in washing his car in his driveway. Mrs. Patterson appeared on her porch with a cup of coffee, as if she had all the time in the world to sit and observe. "Samuel," I said calmly, "what a surprise. And you brought friends." The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Washington, my name is David Fletcher. I'm an attorney representing your son. This is Dr. Michelle Santos from Adult Protective Services and Dr. Robert Kim, a psychiatrist." Adult Protective Services. They were really doing this. They were really trying to have me declared incompetent. "I see," I said, setting my basket of tomatoes on the porch table. "And what can I do for you, Mr. Fletcher?" "We're here because your family is concerned about your welfare and your ability to make sound decisions regarding your care and finances." I looked directly at Samuel. "Is that what you told them? That I can't make sound decisions?" Samuel couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, we just want to make sure you're okay." "By bringing Adult Protective Services to my home? By bringing a psychiatrist to evaluate my mental competency? That's how you make sure I'm okay?" Dr. Santos stepped forward. She was a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes, but I could see she was just doing her job. "Mrs. Washington, we received a report suggesting that you might need assistance with daily living activities and financial management. We're here to conduct a wellness check." "A report from whom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "From your son and daughter-in-law. They've expressed concerns about your judgment, your ability to manage your finances, and your refusal to accept help." "I see. And what exactly did they tell you?" Mr. Fletcher consulted his notes. "They reported that you've been paying other people's bills, that you have overdue payments, that you're refusing necessary medical care, and that you're becoming increasingly isolated and paranoid." Every word was a carefully crafted distortion of the truth. The bills I'd paid for Mrs. Chen became irresponsible financial management. My refusal to sign their documents became refusal of necessary help. My perfectly reasonable suspicion of their motives became paranoia. "Well," I said, "I suppose you should come in and see for yourself." I led them into my living room, which was spotless and beautifully maintained. My bills were organized in a filing system on my desk. My medication was properly sorted in weekly pill containers. Everything was exactly as it should be in the home of a competent, responsible adult. Dr. Kim, the psychiatrist, looked around with obvious surprise. Whatever he had been told to expect, this wasn't it. "Mrs. Washington," Dr. Santos said, "your son mentioned that you've been refusing to let them help with household maintenance and financial management. Can you tell me about that?" "Certainly. Samuel and Melissa want me to sign a power of attorney giving them complete control over my finances and property. They want me to move into the small bedroom upstairs and let them live in the rest of my house. They claim this is for my own good, but I believe it's for their benefit, not mine." "Mom, that's not true," Samuel said. "We just want to take care of you." "By taking away my independence? By treating me like a child? By controlling my money?" I turned to Dr. Santos. "Would you like to see my financial records? I can show you my bank statements, my savings account, my bills, all current and properly managed." "That would be helpful," Dr. Santos said, glancing at Samuel with what looked like confusion. I retrieved my financial records from my desk and spread them out on the coffee table. Everything was meticulously organized and clearly showed that I was managing my affairs perfectly well. Dr. Kim was taking notes. "Mrs. Washington, your son mentioned that you've been paying other people's bills. Can you explain that?" I helped my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, with her husband's medical expenses when their insurance company denied coverage. They're an elderly couple on a fixed income, and he needed physical therapy after his stroke. It was the right thing to do. "And you paid for this out of your own pocket?" "Yes. It cost me about $800 over 2 months, money I could afford to spend and chose to spend to help a neighbor in need." I saw Dr. Santos and Dr. Kim exchange glances. This wasn't the picture of financial irresponsibility they had been led to expect. "Mom," Samuel said, his voice strained, "you never told us about Mrs. Chen's situation. You never asked. And frankly, Samuel, in the past 2 years, you've shown very little interest in my life or my friendships unless they somehow inconvenience you." Mr. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Mrs. Washington, there are also concerns about your social isolation and your refusal to accept help from your family. Social isolation? I almost laughed. Dr. Santos, would you like to speak to my neighbors? Mrs. Chen next door, the Pattersons across the street, the Johnsons 2 houses down? I'm actively involved in this community. I attend events at the senior center. I volunteer at the church food bank. I'm hardly isolated. As if on cue, there was a knock at my front door. I opened it to find Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Patterson, and Mrs. Garcia, all looking concerned. "Evelyn, dear," Mrs. Chen said, "we saw the cars and wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Everything's fine," I said, loud enough for everyone in the living room to hear. "These people are here to check on my welfare. Perhaps you could tell them about my social isolation?" Mrs. Chen looked confused. "Social isolation? Evelyn, you're the most social person on this street. You organized the block party last month. You coordinate our book club. You're always helping someone with something." Mrs. Patterson nodded emphatically. "If anything, Evelyn, you need to slow down. You do too much for other people, not too little." I invited my neighbors in, and what followed was 15 minutes of testimony that completely destroyed Samuel and Melissa's narrative. My neighbors described me as competent, caring, socially engaged, and mentally sharp. They talked about my help during crises, my organizational skills, my financial contributions to community causes. Dr. Kim asked Mrs. Chen directly, "In your opinion, does Mrs. Washington show any signs of confusion, memory problems, or poor judgment?" Mrs. Chen looked at him like he had asked if the sky was green. "Dr. Kim, Evelyn is sharper than people half her age. She manages the finances for our neighborhood watch program. She helped my grandson with his college applications last year." Confusion? The only confusing thing here is why anyone would think she needs help managing her own life. By the time my neighbors left, the atmosphere in the room had completely changed. Dr. Santos and Dr. Kim were no longer conducting an evaluation of a potentially incompetent elderly woman. They were witnessing what appeared to be a family dispute being disguised as a welfare concern. Dr. Kim asked to speak with me privately and conducted a brief mental status examination. I answered questions about current events, performed simple calculations, demonstrated my memory and reasoning skills. When we finished, he was shaking his head. "Mrs. Washington, you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Your mental status is completely normal for someone your age." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Dr. Santos answered, "We'll file a report stating that we found no evidence of neglect, abuse, or incompetency. You're clearly capable of managing your own affairs." I turned to look at Samuel and Melissa. Samuel looked ashamed, staring at his hands. Melissa looked furious, like her careful plans were crumbling around her. "There is one more thing," Dr. Santos said. "Mr. and Mrs. Washington, filing a false report with Adult Protective Services is a serious matter. If this was an attempt to manipulate the system for financial gain, there could be legal consequences." "It wasn't false," Melissa protested. "She's old, she's stubborn, she's not thinking clearly about what's best for her." "Ma'am," Dr. Kim said firmly, "I've just conducted a thorough evaluation. Mrs. Washington is thinking very clearly. The question is whether you are." After the officials left, Samuel, Melissa, and I sat in my living room in heavy silence. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Melissa said." "Don't blame Melissa," I said quietly. "You're a grown man, Samuel. You made your own choices. You chose to believe that your mother was incompetent rather than having a conversation with me. You chose to bring strangers into my home to have me evaluated like I was a problem to be solved. But you were being unreasonable about the papers. I was being smart about the papers. Samuel, those documents would have given you control over everything I own. My house, my money, my medical decisions. If someone came to you with papers like that, what would you do?" For the first time, Samuel really seemed to think about what they had been asking me to do. I guess I would want to understand why it was necessary." "Exactly. And when I asked why it was necessary, what was your answer? That I needed to be managed, that I needed to be controlled, that I needed a corner to die in." My voice cracked slightly on the last words. Samuel's face crumpled. "Mom, I never meant—" "But you did mean it, Samuel. Maybe not consciously, but you meant it. You looked at the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who loves you more than her own life, and you decided she was a burden. You decided she was in the way. I looked at Melissa, who was sitting rigidly in her chair, her jaw set in anger. And you, I said to her, you saw an opportunity, an old woman with a nice house and a steady income, ripe for exploitation. You convinced my son that taking care of me meant taking control of me. That's not true, Melissa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Tell me, Melissa, what's the first thing you planned to do with this house once you had control of it? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, we were going to renovate, make it more modern. With my money? Another pause. It would have increased the value. For whom? For me, locked away in that upstairs bedroom? Or for you, when you eventually inherited it? Samuel was staring at his wife like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. I think you both should leave now, I said, standing up. You've done enough damage for one day. Mom, please, let's talk about this. Let's figure out how to move forward. Samuel, I've been trying to talk to you for months. You haven't been listening. You've been hearing Melissa's voice, not mine. Until you can hear your own mother's voice again, until you can remember who I am and what I mean to you, there's nothing to talk about. They left without another word. I watched from my window as they sat in their car for several minutes, having what looked like a heated argument. Finally, they drove away. I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of my competent, independent life, and tried to process what had just happened. My own son had tried to have me declared incompetent. He had filed false reports, brought strangers to evaluate my mental health, attempted to destroy my reputation in my own community. And he had failed. Not because I was lucky, but because I had spent 68 years building a life worth defending. Because I had earned the respect and loyalty of people who knew my true character. Because I had been strong enough to prepare for this battle, and smart enough to fight it on my own terms. But victory felt hollow when it came at the cost of losing my son. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Day 11. Today was the war I've been preparing for. I won. But I lost something too. I lost the illusion that my son's love was unconditional. I lost the dream that my sacrifices would be remembered with gratitude. I lost the hope that family always means safety. Tomorrow, I need to decide what to do with the life I've successfully defended. Because winning the right to live my own life means nothing if I don't know what kind of life I want to live. Outside my window, Mrs. Chen's kitchen light was still on. Mrs. Patterson's porch light glowed softly in the darkness. The Johnsons' dog was barking at something in their backyard. These were the sounds of my real family, the family I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Maybe it was everything. 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of gumbo that smelled like home and healing when I heard the knock on my door. Through the window, I could see Samuel standing on my porch, alone. No Melissa, no lawyers, no officials, just my son, looking older and more tired than I remembered. I had been expecting this visit. Mrs. Chen had mentioned seeing him drive slowly past the house several times over the past few weeks, never stopping, just looking. Today, apparently, he had found the courage to get out of the car. "Hello, Samuel," I said when I opened the door. "Hi, Mom." His voice was quiet, uncertain. May I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. The family photos were still on the mantel, including several of him at various ages. His high school graduation, his college graduation, his wedding day. I had never taken them down, even after everything that happened. "Something smells good," he said. "Gumbo. I'm making it for the church fundraiser tomorrow." I paused. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be nice." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he had done his homework as a child, where we had eaten countless meals together, where he had told me about his first job, his first girlfriend, his dreams for the future. Now we sat like strangers, trying to find our way back to each other across a chasm of hurt and disappointment. "Mom, I came to apologize," Samuel said finally. "For everything. For the papers, for the lawyers, for calling Adult Protective Services. For all of it." I stirred my coffee slowly, waiting for him to continue. "Melissa and I, We're separated. Have been for 3 months now. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness for my son's pain, but also a sense that perhaps justice had found its own way to my doorstep. I'm sorry to hear that, Samuel. Marriage is difficult. He laughed bitterly. Yeah. Well, it turns out that when you marry someone who's willing to manipulate and lie to get what she wants from your mother, she's also willing to manipulate and lie to get what she wants from you. What happened? Samuel ran his hands through his hair. I found out she had been planning to divorce me all along. She had already talked to a lawyer about how to maximize her settlement. The whole thing with you, with your house, it was part of her strategy. She figured if we could get control of your assets, that would be part of the marital estate when we divorced. The cold calculation of it took my breath away. Melissa hadn't just been greedy. She had been strategic. She had been playing a long game that involved destroying my relationship with my son as a stepping stone to her own financial security. I found emails, Samuel continued, between her and her lawyer, between her and her mother. They had it all planned out. They called you the old lady problem and talked about how to handle you. Mom, I am so ashamed. I let her convince me that you were the problem, when she was the one manipulating everyone. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Samuel, I need you to understand something. Yes, Melissa manipulated you, but you made choices too. You chose to believe the worst about me instead of talking to me. You chose to trust her judgment over your own mother's character. You chose to prioritize money and property over love and respect. Tears were rolling down his face now. I know I did. And I don't know how to live with that. I don't know how to forgive myself for what I put you through. You start by understanding why you did it, I said gently. What was it about me that made you so willing to believe I was incompetent? What was it about our relationship that made it easy for her to drive a wedge between us? Samuel was quiet for a long time, thinking. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was ashamed, he said, of where I came from, of you working as a custodian, of this neighborhood, of being poor when I was growing up. When I met Melissa and her family, with their money and their big house and their country club memberships, I wanted to be part of that world. And I thought that meant leaving my old world behind. It hurt to hear, but it wasn't a surprise. I had seen the signs for years. The way he seemed uncomfortable when his colleagues met me, the way he never invited me to his office parties, the way he gradually stopped talking about his childhood and his father. And when Melissa started suggesting that you were a burden, that you were holding us back financially, it was easier to believe her than to face the fact that I was ashamed of my own mother. Oh, Samuel. My heart broke for him, even after everything he had put me through. You were never poor in the ways that mattered. You were rich in love, in opportunity, in support. The fact that we didn't have much money didn't make our life together less valuable. I know that now, but I didn't know it then, or I didn't want to know it. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Mom, is there any chance you could forgive me? I know I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you in ways that might be unforgivable, but is there any chance we could try to rebuild what I destroyed? I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I saw the teenager who had worked part-time jobs to help with household expenses. I saw the young man who had hugged me so tightly at his father's grave and promised we would always take care of each other. But I also saw the man who had tried to take away my dignity, my independence, my home. I saw the man who had filed false reports against me, who had brought strangers to evaluate my mental competency, who had been willing to destroy my reputation in my own community. Samuel, I forgave you months ago, I said. Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to anger was poisoning my own life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. And it doesn't mean automatically going back to the way things were. I understand. Do you? Because the way things were is what allowed this to happen in the first place. The way things were involved you taking me for granted, not really seeing me as a person with my own needs and dreams and dignity. The way things were put me in a position where I was vulnerable to being manipulated and controlled. Samuel nodded, accepting the truth of what I was saying. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, I continued, it has to be different. It has to be based on mutual respect. You have to see me as an equal, not as your responsibility or your burden or your embarrassment. You have to value my independence, not try to take it away. I want that, Samuel said. I want to know you as the person you are, not just as my mother. I want to understand your life, your friends, your interests. I want to be proud of you again, the way I should have been all along. What does that look like practically? I asked. How do we move forward? Samuel thought carefully before answering. I don't know. I guess we start slow. Maybe I could visit more often, just to talk. Maybe you could tell me about your life, your neighbors, your volunteering. Maybe I could meet your friends, really meet them, not just nod politely and leave. I'd like that. And Mom, I want to make something clear. This house is yours. Your money is yours. Your decisions are yours. I will never again try to control or manage your life. If you want my help with something, you'll ask for it. If you don't ask, I won't assume you need help. It was a start, not a solution, not a return to innocence, but a start. Over the following months, Samuel began visiting regularly. Not the dutiful, obligatory visits of before, but genuine time spent together. He met Mrs. Chen and helped her with her computer when it was acting up. He joined the neighborhood barbecue and actually seemed to enjoy talking to my friends. He volunteered with me at the church food bank and saw firsthand the community work I was involved in. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild trust. He told me about his divorce proceedings, about therapy he was attending, to understand how he had lost himself in someone else's manipulation. I told him about my own healing process, about the friends who had supported me, about the legal protections I had put in place to ensure this could never happen again. One evening, as we sat in my garden watching the sunset, Samuel said, "Mom, I have something to tell you." I braced myself, not sure what new revelation might be coming. I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately, about what he would think of how I treated you. Samuel's father had been a good man, not perfect, but good. He had loved me fiercely and had adored his son. He would have been disappointed in me, Samuel continued. He would have been ashamed of what I became, but he also would have been proud of you, proud of how you stood up for yourself, proud of how you built a life worth defending. Your father loved us both, I said. He would want us to love each other, but not at the expense of our dignity or self-respect. I think I understand that now. A year after that first apology visit, Samuel brought me a gift. It was a small wooden plaque for my garden that read, "Evelyn's Garden, where love grows in all seasons." I wanted you to have something that recognized this space as yours, he said. Not just your garden, but your life, your home, your choices. All of it is yours, and it's beautiful. I hung the plaque near my tomato plants, where I could see it every morning when I worked in the garden. It reminded me not just of Samuel's apology, but of my own journey. I had defended my right to live my own life, but more than that, I had discovered what kind of life I wanted to live. I was not just Samuel's mother anymore. I was Evelyn Washington, neighbor, friend, volunteer, survivor, woman of strength and dignity. I was part of a community that valued me for who I was, not just for what I had given up for others. Some evenings, as I sat on my porch watching the neighborhood children play in the street, I thought about the woman I had been when this story started. That woman had been disappearing, slowly erasing herself to accommodate other people's expectations and demands. She had been forgetting her own worth in her desperation to hold on to her son's love. But that woman was gone now, replaced by someone stronger and more complete. Someone who had learned that love without respect is not really love at all. Someone who had discovered that the family you choose can be just as powerful as the family you're born into. My revenge against Samuel and Melissa had not been dramatic or cruel. It had been something much more devastating. I had refused to disappear. I had insisted on my own value. I had built a life so rich and meaningful that their attempts to diminish me had only highlighted their own emptiness. And in the end, that had been enough. More than enough. As I write this final entry in my notebook, sitting at my kitchen table in my own house, surrounded by the sounds of my chosen family and the neighborhood around me, I realize something important. This story was never really about revenge at all. It was about resurrection. The resurrection of Evelyn Washington, who had almost been buried alive in her own life, but who had clawed her way back to the surface and discovered that the sun was still shining. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let other people write the end of your story. Sometimes the greatest victory is just staying alive, really, truly alive, in your own life. And sometimes the best revenge is living so well that those who tried to diminish you are forced to see what they almost destroyed. I am 69 years old now, and I am just beginning.